Greetings from Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium, which just turned 100 years old, by the way. And welcome to the flagship podcast recap of Texas's 49-17 victory over Florida on Saturday here at DKR. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, Eric Henry. Eric, this was the beginning of phase 3 for the Texas Longhorns. Steve Sarkisian divided the season up in these last 4 games against Florida, at Arkansas, home against Kentucky, at Texas A&M, makes up phase 3. And you and I talked about it on the flagship podcast during the week, that this needed to be a tone setter for the Texas Longhorns, especially on offense. And it felt like a tone setter today. 49-17 in a decisive first half where Texas took a 35-0 lead at intermission. The offense finally became its explosive self, and Quinn Ewers was pretty efficient. It was a little choppy at first for Quinn Ewers. The offense, they kind of butchered a drive down into the red zone of Florida. Quintravious Wisner gets caught running, trying to cut back, 7-yard loss, leads to 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10. And then Bert Auburn misses a 51-yard field goal. But Quinn Ewers, he, almost threw an interception on the next drive, but then the 44-yard end around by Isaiah Bond sort of sets up the next touchdown pass, an explosive play touchdown pass to Matthew Golden. And Quinn Ewers ends up finishing 19 of 27 for 333 yards and 5 touchdowns before giving way to Arch Manning. Eric, your thoughts?
Chip, you pretty much hit the nail on the head as far as a lot of the points that I would cover. One, this was the type of performance that you wanted to see from Texas coming out of the bye week. You didn't get that coming out of the first bye week, albeit the score may have looked good in the Red River shootout, but we all know some of the issues that took place in that game. This was not that type of contest. Now, granted, you could probably make the argument that Oklahoma, while they're certainly their season's left a lot to be desired, they're not quite in the state that the Florida Gators football program in, but that's a conversation for the folks over at Swamp 24/7. Here at Horns 24/7, it's just, sunshine and everything that's there in the fact that Texas came out the way they did following the bye week. The thing that I want to touch on, and I'll have this up shortly following this broadcast up on horns247.com, is how well Texas played complementary football. That's something that head coach Steve Sarkisian opened his press conference with. For those of you who may not be familiar with complementary football, in essence, it's all 3 phases of the game complementing each other. 1, Texas taking advantage of the turnovers, be able to turn those turnovers into points. Things like flipping the field position game. If you notice, the score that put Texas ahead 21-0, that was spurred by a Silas Bolden 13-yard punt return, and it really put Texas in position starting that drive at midfield. He took a look at where that drive could have started. Texas did a great job of flipping the field. And, of course, the defense playing well, continuing that high standard of play. I know some people, I took a look on the message boards on the site, some people are nipping a little bit about the run game. I'll say this, right? And Chip, I'll be curious if you have the same perspective. Sure, you'd like to see Texas play the run a little bit better than they did. But, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, I'd be willing to venture that over half of those rushing yards came in the second half, Chip, where, quite frankly, I think if we had a look at defensive coordinator Pete Kwiatkowski's play call, his play sheet, wasn't exactly, bringing out the top-notch stuff there, kind of playing pretty vanilla in terms of what was out there. And also, Texas was playing second and third stringers against Florida's first team when they were able to have some success against the run. So I'm not going to read too much into that. All in all, in my mind, this was about as complete of a performance. A few things you could nitpick, as you talked about, some of the offensive penalties. DeAndre Moore had a couple drops. You talked about the run there by Quintravious Wisner that put Texas behind the chains. Obviously, they settled for that 50-yard field goal attempt that was missed. But all things considered, especially, Chip, now that we are in the college football playoff rankings, and these wins and the way you win matters because you're trying to impress a committee now. In my mind, you couldn't have asked for much more from the Longhorns here on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, you've come to expect championship caliber defense from Texas, and that's what you got in the first half, in the decisive first half. And even in the first half, Eric, I thought it was interesting. Maybe once they realized DJ Lagway was not going to play, and they probably didn't think he was going to play all week long, they did get young guys into the game early on defense, especially on the defensive line. Sadir Mitchell, Aaron Bryant, guys who, were trying to help fill the void left by the first half targeting ejection suspension for Vernon Broughton, who has been a key player for Texas, obviously all season long. Kobe Black, another guy who got lots of snaps in a meaningful first half. Ty Anthony Smith benefits from Alfred Collins batting a pass. Ty Anthony Smith, freshman linebacker, comes up with the interception. And as you mentioned, Eric, all three turnovers by the Texas defense get turned into touchdowns by the Texas offense, which we had not seen the previous 2 weeks when the Texas defense got the Texas offense 6 turnovers and the offense only turned those 6 turnovers into 10 points. Today, 3 turnovers turned into 3 touchdowns. And that's complimentary football. And that's what you want to see. I thought the 4th and 1 decision to go for it on Texas's own 24-yard line in a 0-0 game, and to give it to Jarek Gibson, the freshman running back who had not had a carry since the Oklahoma game back on October 12th. And he pounds his way for a couple yards and picks up that first down, and that leads to a touchdown drive and kind of got everything going at that point. Kind of a brazen decision, Eric. What did you think of Steve Sarkisian? And he said that wasn't even the hardest decision he had for the day. But he goes for it. Remember, I was immediately thinking of Mike Elko against South Carolina. He went for it from his own 31 in a very similar situation. They didn't make it, and it sort of began an avalanche of momentum for South Carolina a week ago. But what did you think of that, Eric?
Chip, here's my thing, right? You don't have to look at the decision in a vacuum, right? I don't think Steve Sarkisian would have made the decision that he did against Georgia. I don't think he would have made that decision if this were in the big house against Michigan, right? And I don't think he'll make that decision in the college football playoff. This is no disrespect to the Gators. However, they're starting a third-string walk-on quarterback. You're talking about a defense that in their sudden change drill, right, in which they have to go and defend a short field, whether typically it'd be off a turnover, but in this case, if you get stopped on 4th down, it's the same thing as a turnover. You have faith in your defense. So I don't have an issue with the decision. I know some people watching this may say, Eric, you're playing the Monday morning quarterback, playing the result, right? No, truthfully speaking, and Chip, we've talked about this. If this is the number 5 team in the nation, and of course Texas views itself as at least probably a top 4 team in the nation, going against a 4-4 Florida Gators team, starting a third-string quarterback, and a defense that has been hit or miss at times, I expect you to be able to convert that type of situation. And you talked about, notably, they went with Jarek Gibson in that situation. So that certainly was encouraging to see. But Chip, I'm all about, setting a tone, right? I said it jokingly to you and Jeff Howe in the press box during that decision. If you're going to be all gas, no brakes, you got to be all gas, no brakes. Now, selectively be all gas, no brakes. But I truly didn't have an issue with the decision to go for it in this situation. Come out, establish yourself, set a tone, and they did that in my mind.
Yeah, and Jarek Gibson had a good day and a little rough sailing as well. So he ends up with 100 yards rushing. He did a lot of the heavy lifting in the 4th quarter, but he had a couple fumbles. He lost one of them, and so that's something that you have to keep an eye on. But he does bring a different element to the Texas running game. He is a stronger runner between the tackles than either Jaden Blue or Quintravian Wisner, who are excellent receivers. And I have to give it up to Jaden Blue. In the post game we just wrapped up, he said that this is the best he's felt physically all season long. I thought he looked fantastic in this game, really quick, great hands. I mean, the guy just makes plays, whether it's running, catching the football. But I thought Jaden Blue had a great game. And yes, I see my man Chris Bennett in our comments section saying Trey Moore balled out. Yeah, I thought Alfred Collins played fantastic in this game, and I thought Trey Moore was right there. Trey Moore recovers the fumble that Anthony Hill forces, as Florida's, trying to get out of their own end. That leads to a nice short field touchdown for Texas, and Alfred Collins bats a pass that Ty Anthony Smith intercepts, and then he also applied the pressure on the interception that Andrew Makuba got. So definite helmet stickers for Alfred Collins and Trey Moore, Eric.
No, most definitely. Again, when you talk about performance on the defense, the thing that's really encouraging, Chip, and we've talked about it, whether it's on the flagship or in other platforms, 11-man defense to me, Chip, is huge. I think that's been the difference. A lot of people have asked, well, what's been the difference between last year's Texas defense and this year's Texas defense? Last year's is certainly one that was outstanding, spearheaded by Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, and of course, Jalen Ford. This year's taking a step forward. It's the fact that, Chip, they can turn to the man behind the man, right? Vernon Broughton can go down for a half of play, and they can turn to Jermaine Lole and Bill Norton and the rest of the guys and say, hey, go step up. Alfred Collins can step up. You're starting to see Trey Moore, even though I know it was talked about, all right, it's kind of him making the transition from UTSA to playing in the SEC and being a little slow. He's now finding his footing. You talked about a litany of the young guys, Kobe Black, Jelani McDonald got the start for Andrew Makuba today. Of course, Makuba come back from the injury. He's been playing well over the past few weeks. That, to me, is the sign of the growth and maturity. And Chip, also what Steve Sarkisian talked about in the bye was developing more depth for this stretch run. So, that's kind of, when you talk about those final thoughts on the defense, we're going back to kind of Quinn Ewers and some of the offensive things they did. That, to me, was impressive, Chip, is they're finding more players, more depth on defense to have an impact on the outcome of games.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the final stats, it's going to show that Florida ran the ball, had a 100-yard rusher. That was all in the second half. Texas held Florida to 1 of 7 on third down in the first half. And again, Texas led 35-0 at halftime. So things, as Steve Sarkisian said, got a little sideways in the second half. You're playing a lot of backups, but again, it was 49-17 for Texas in this game. Eric, as we look ahead, and you're looking for building blocks out of this game as you look toward Arkansas, who is off this week. And by the way, Miami goes down today. So you mentioning Texas as maybe the number 4 team in the college football playoff rankings, moving up from number 5, very likely. But Eric, what out of this game do you think are the biggest building blocks for Texas as they prepare to finish the season at Arkansas, home against Kentucky, and then at Texas A&M?
Chip, as I said, talking about the offense, we can debate till the cows come home about the deep ball and some of the things. And even Quinn Ewers, overthrew a deep ball today. DeAndre Moore obviously had one that he kind of bobbled and wasn't able to haul in. But Chip, I'm going to continue to say it. The bread and butter of this offense is the short and shallow passing game. Quintravion Wisner's 50-yard catch and run, the screen for a touchdown. That was a short pass. How many times did we see, IB, Matt Golden, hauling short passes, get up the field for yards after catch? It's that formula, Chip, being able to, and if they can do it well, which I think a game like this, building that rhythm, building that momentum can help you do it well for the rest of the season. As I talked about on a previous flagship podcast, Texas A&M, not necessarily the best pass defense. Arkansas ranked, I believe 108th, if memory serves me correct, in pass defense. You're going to have the opportunity to do those things there to play the football, the type of football that Steve Sarkisian has referenced, which is we want to play aggressive, build a lead, and then allow the running game to do what it can to close out games in the second half. You talk about Jarrett Gibson finding 100 yards. I don't have the exact numbers on me. I have to pull it in a second. But Texas in the first half, I'll try to do it on the fly. How many rushing yards did they have in the first half, right? But
56, 10 carries for 56 yards.
Okay, 10 carries for 56 yards, but then they finished the game over 210 on the ground total, right? So that plays into the formula that Steve Sarkisian's talked about. To play aggressive, use that short and intermediate passing game as an extension of the run game, get a lead, and then close it out with your run game. And obviously that helps out your defense as well. It allows them to be able to play a little freely, Chip, and go create turnovers, do things like that when you're playing from ahead. So when you ask in terms of building blocks, I should say, that's the biggest building block for me is this offensive identity and seeing it come to fruition and working against an SEC opponent. Continue that for the next 3 weeks. I think that's huge, Chip.
Yeah, Texas finishes with 7 penalties for 70 yards, 4 of those on the offense, a questionable holding call on Kelvin Banks. But you had a false start on Trevor Gooseby as Texas started playing the backups. That happened in the third quarter. We really were keeping an eye on the penalties because the penalties got in the way against Georgia. 4 false starts in the Georgia game derailed 4 different drives. In the Vanderbilt game, the penalties were on offense, they were on defense, they were on special teams. You had a block in the back call on Jelani McDonald on Trey Moore's fumble return. Okay. And then you had a personal foul on I think that wasn't on Michael Taff, but I think they got that wrong. But, the penalties were not factors today. So, and the penalty number came down. It's still too many. 7 for 70 is still too many. But they were not as big of factors in today's game as they will be, say, next week against Arkansas. So that's something that, we'll continue to monitor because that was a huge stumbling block for Texas against Georgia. And then it made the Vanderbilt game much closer than it actually was. I think, Eric, you had a couple uncharacteristic drops by DeAndre Moore today. He's been so good. He came into the game leading the team in touchdown catches. Steve Sarkisian mentioned that, he was really upset with himself after those drops. And Steve Sarkisian said, hey, we needed everything you gave us last week against Vanderbilt. And today we got other guys stepping up to help make up for the drops. So even complementary football within the offense, Eric, with other guys stepping up to make up for the 2 deep ball drops, one in the end zone by DeAndre Moore.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you talk about complementary football within the offense. I asked Matt Golden the question, hey, when a guy like Demo drops a couple passes, what's kind of the approach? And he's like, hey, yeah, man, I just tell him you're going to get the next one, because there's going to be more opportunities. But also, and Steve Sarkisian referenced this in his post game, try to tell him, look at the scoreboard. We're winning. We're doing what we're supposed to do, right? So kind of don't harp on yourself too much. But to your point, yes, I mean, this and it's like I referenced earlier in terms of the short and intermediate passing game. I think these things are kind of the staple and the bread and butter of what Texas' offense is going to be in 2024. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but especially in the meat of SEC play, no disrespect to Colorado State or ULM or UTSA, right? But you're not going to come out and run for 200 yards in the first half in this conference. It's too good of athletes. You're going to have to find ways to set yourself up for success. And I think you saw that here tonight in my mind, Chip.
Yeah, and if we're talking about helmet stickers, I do my snap judgments and helmet stickers. From the game, we talked about the helmet stickers for Alfred Collins, for Trey Moore, but also for Matt Golden. I think he caught all 3 of his first 3 targets, and 2 of them were for touchdowns. 29 yards, 32-yard touchdowns. Whenever Texas needs a big play, it seems like Matt Golden is the guy. And then Isaiah Bond coming back from the ankle injury that caused him to miss the Vanderbilt game. He looked super explosive on that end around for 44 yards. And then on a 34-yard catch and run, it was a 4-yard pass, Eric, to your point. It was a 4-yard pass to Isaiah Bond. He took it the other 30 and he ran right through Florida defenders, looked like a rocket ship taking off. Going through that Florida defense. And so that's the key for Texas. They have to be explosive. Today they had 10 explosive pass plays of 15 yards or more. 5 of those were for touchdowns. So you had the 29-yard touchdown pass to Golden, the 22-yard touchdown pass to Gunnar Helm, who was wide open. How does that happen? 50-yard catch and run touchdown to Quintravian Wisner, the 32-yard touchdown pass to Matt Golden, and then the 34-yard touchdown pass to Bond. So 34-yard catch and run. So, Eric, that is what we came to know and expect from this Texas offense through the first 5 games of the season, and that's what we saw today. You can say that Florida was banged up, certainly at the quarterback position. Their top 4 corners are hurt. So, how much do you make out of this win, Eric, considering that Florida was banged up?
Well, it's like I led in the open, right? I mean, first off, you play who's on the schedule, right? They can't control that Florida's a 4-4 team coming in or struggling now 4-5. There's step one. Step two, they can't control whether Florida's banged up or not, right? To me, it's the way you win the game, right? And of course, against Vandy, you saw that a couple weeks ago. Even that 27-24 score, if you dig within the details of that game could have been a much wider spread. Had a couple things unhappen, most notably the Vernon Broughton targeting penalty, which paved the way for Diego Pavia to get that late touchdown. But in my mind,
and wiped a 72-yard pick six off the board.
There you go. Yeah, in my mind, I'm not going to nitpick what Florida's issues are. I look up at the scoreboard, and they just turned it off, so I don't have it. But it was a 49-17 win, yeah. Right? So that to me speaks volumes in my opinion. Chip.
Eric, anything else that stands out from this one that you think is important?
Well, I mean, we talked about, kind of the depth on the defensive side of the ball building. That to me, I think is important, especially as Texas, listen, when you get out of the rest of this schedule, and Texas A&M obviously is quote unquote the best team on the schedule remaining. But when you get into whether it's a college football playoff game at home, a first round matchup, or if Texas gets a bye and goes into the quarterfinal to start their playoff run, then you're going to need as many playmakers as possible. So that stood out to me from the defensive side of the ball, as I mentioned. The fact that the offense, Quinn Ewers, got his rhythm back. And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but if you're watching Texas and you're expecting them to come out and establish the line of scrimmage through the run early in a game, who knows? Maybe Steve Sarkisian will make a liar out of me and he'll just change the whole philosophy and do that one week. I don't see that happening. I think what you saw today is the ideal recipe for success for Texas offensively.
Yeah, and that's how they've done it all year. They've thrown to set up the run, and it worked well today in this win over Florida. And again, Trey Moore making plays 2 games in a row. Sometimes it clicks. We talk about Jalen Ford getting that 3rd down sack against Bryce Young in Alabama in 22, and then his season took off. He probably should have been the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Sometimes you just have to make a play to get that confidence going. He had the big 3rd down pass breakup last 2 weeks ago against Vanderbilt. Today, he gets his first sack of the season, a couple tackles for loss as well. So, kudos to Trey Moore for getting, starting to string games together with plays made. Cannot say enough about Alfred Collins. This guy has been playing well all year and came up huge today. That was a 3rd and 3 at the Texas 16 that he stuffs for a 1-yard gain, and Billy Napier goes for the 30-yard field goal. Eric and I joked with each other that Napier was more interested in trying to make sure that Florida's scoring streak, which dates back to 1988, didn't come to an end on his watch. He goes for the 30-yard field goal and they miss it. And so huge play by Alfred Collins there on 3rd down, as we mentioned, the tipped pass that leads to an interception for Ty Anthony Smith, and then the quarterback pressure that leads to the interception by Andrew Makuba. So, and Anthony Hill forced the fumble that Trey Moore recovered deep in Florida territory. So Anthony Hill just continues to be the consistent playmaker for this Texas defense. But a solid. Steve Sarkisian called it the most complete game of the season. So we'll end it on that, Eric. Thanks everybody for tuning in to our flagship podcast recap of Texas's 49-17 victory over Florida. And as we mentioned, Miami loses today to Georgia Tech. So Texas looking to move up in the college football playoff rankings. Please like and subscribe to Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Feel free to leave us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to us. And And make sure that you're an annual member over at horns247.com so that you get all the team and recruiting scoop at Horns 24/7, and you get all the VIP intel on every team site in the preeminent 24/7 sports network. For Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep the faith.